John is the former CEO of Electronic Arts, and he is now very closely consulting with Unity Technologies, and Will writes Centertainment. So
there we go.
Nice to have you back here. You were here last year as well. So you did have a sort of a strong predictions last year about the sort of where the next generation consoles were going to go. I wonder what your latest thought is on console and mobile, or console versus mobile.
Well, one of the things that I found kind of distressing is a lot of folks, when they look at mobile, PC, console, they want to describe it as mobile versus console. And in fact, on your stage last year, a couple of folks outlined this thesis that within a matter of a handful of years, we're going to see tablets with CPUs and GPUs every bit as powerful as the current generation of consoles. We're going to see wireless HDMI out so that you can play these games that are really as powerful and as interesting and as rich as a console game right from your tablet, put it right up on the big screen TV, and then you can use your tablet or your mobile phone as a controller. And sort of ipso facto, it's the end of the console, and as we know it. And I think about that and say, no, that's just another console. Mm-hmm. In other words, it proves the point. What is a console, at least to me? It's about experiencing a great, rich game on the biggest and best screen in my household, where I get to sit back on the couch and play and focus on that. A little bit different than most of my mobile experiences that are sometimes on the go or sometimes when I'm doing something else. And so I think there was a pretty, at least I took it this way, a pretty fundamental misunderstanding of the way it works out there, at least from my interpretation. I think there's really three screen sizes. There's little ones, there's medium size, and there's big. For me, the big TV is the one in my living room. That's my big screen. My PC is mid-size, and my mobile phone is small. There's different, UI. There's a very big difference between a touch screen, a controller, and a keyboard. And even with that sort of, the tablet experience, HDMI out on your TV, I'm still not looking forward to walking up and touching my TV. I prefer the couch. So really what we've got right now is we're in the golden age of gaming. Finally, it's not a single screen experience. It's big, medium, and small. It's touch, it's control. It's 2 minutes, 20 minutes, it's 2 hours. And I think all three of them are thriving right now.
Mm-hmm. So we're in a golden age, but I do wonder if we're all going to be working for the Chinese or the Amazons or the Googlers.
Well, I'd start on that point by saying that we've spent, in our industry, decades talking about the console wars or the platform wars, whether that was a handheld war between Sony and Nintendo, a platform war between Sega and Nintendo, or Sony and Nintendo, and or then Sony and Microsoft. And it's very easy to get tunnel vision around that battle, that war. And I think we've transcended into a very different time of large-scale ecosystems. Realistically, Google has a massive gaming ecosystem that touches all sorts of devices in all sorts of different ways, from Chrome to Android to the devices to their TV, dongle and the rest of it. It's all going to be touching the world we work in. Apple has a massive ecosystem. It touches multiple devices in multiple different ways and multiple business models. Interestingly enough, it's quite clear to me that Facebook has that same thing between mobile and your PC and ambitions for a lot more. Amazon clearly has an insatiable appetite to build such an ecosystem. And you can look at others. I mean, is there any question that if you look at all of the things that Samsung has been trying, that they're seeking out, this type of a system. And Microsoft has got different pieces of it between their mobile strategies and their console strategy. So, I think in the end, if we're gamers, if we're about building great games, what Andrew Wilson said this morning is probably the most relevant. Ultimately, we want to work for the gamer. We want to work on behalf of the gamer for what they want. But it would shock me in the course of the next half a decade that virtually everyone in this room, either directly or indirectly, or anybody that's reading these comments, isn't either directly or indirectly working for one of these large ecosystem players. The Google, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, ultimately, companies like Samsung as they join that fray. Massive resources, global reach, multiple devices, and to a significant degree, walled gardens around their own ecosystems.
So if we do get our tunnel vision back for a bit here, who has won the console war?
Well,
Sony, Microsoft?
Well, actually, I'll start with something slightly different. After 8.5 dry years waiting for something shiny to put under my TV as a gamer, I know I did. I know that anybody that cares about games won. Think about the degree of innovation that went into every other consumer electronics product, every consumer service, every technology service that we involve ourselves with, and how much innovation took place in the 8 years prior to November of 2013. It was staggering. And it's actually hard to imagine that the most important CPU in my household was static for those 8 years. So we've now got something new to play with. It's exciting, it's fun. The second answer to your question, I think, is for console companies, but content companies in particular won. I'm very impressed at what Ubi and Take-Two are doing and or have announced to do in this generation. I think they've always been in the second tier of the largest players in the world they compete. And I think they both have their sights on joining the top tier, the very highest end, and trying to knock off an Activision or an EA. And I think they've got the intellectual property and the ambition, years of execution in front of them to make that happen. But they've executed well enough in transition to give them a shot of moving up moving up a level in the elevator. I used to compete a lot with Activision, but I have to say they've done a nice job. I think where the jury needs to weigh in a little bit is, are they going to be able to sustain Destiny and COD both without watching, their last biggest franchise get sacrificed at the altar of their new biggest franchise? There's no question they got massive innovation in Destiny and big plans to keep Call of Duty at the top of the charts. If they can pull that off, they're winners here. And I would say Electronic Arts. Electronic Arts brought north of 50 titles into the last transition, 360, PlayStation, and Nintendo platform back, 8 years ago. It didn't work for them. I think they blew the transition, or we blew the transition. What's really impressive right now is whether it's FIFA or it's Madden or it's their core franchises to go beyond that, or what they've done with Titanfall, the business partnership around Star Wars, I think they're back on top. So
you are a year and a half outside of EA, and for a while, a lot of things were sort of running that you had started, I guess. But probably by now, there are things that are appearing that you may have not had anything to do with. What's your perspective now on EA from the outside?
Well, I'd say, first off, I'm really proud of the team. It's a great team of people. They're all the same folks I worked with. I'm happy they're doing well. In terms of things I didn't work on, I think I'm going to have to watch for this holiday. I mean, if you think about the game industry, most of what happens is a 1.5 to 2 year gestation at the kind of the shortest end. And so, obviously I have inside information. I played everything that they've shipped on console and PC so far before I left the company. But, I don't want to try to take credit for the last year and a half. I'm just really proud of what they've done. Whether it's, think about it. They, super successful on console with this transition. In the year, leading up to, last fiscal year, they did just shy of $2 billion in digital. And, realistically speaking, digital is not an easy skill set to master. And for what it's worth, it's not an easy culture to master. As Andrew's comments this morning, they want to master the 2-minute to 20-minute in addition to the 2-hour. But there's more than just that. Learning to deal with the speed and response of live content management is a huge shift in culture. And there's no question in my mind, I left 3/4 of the way through that transition, and Andrew's taken the flag forward to continue that transition along with his own innovations. So, I don't know, when you pass the baton on camera on one day and you pass the baton on what's going to ship on a later day, and they're responsible for it, and they're doing great.
So since you've left, you've mixed with a lot of startups. You're advising Unity closely. What have you learned from that?
Well, Unity is actually a fabulous case study, at least in my mind. I've worked very, very, very closely with them over the last year, maybe a little more. The first thing I've learned that there's almost no excuse not to work with Unity, anybody in the development community. And let me explain why. If you want to be successful on multiple consoles, on PC, web app, you want to capture Samsung televisions or LG televisions, you want to capture Android, or you want to capture iOS, you want to be on that full opportunity to reach your marketplace. And you also want to recognize a truth that is undeniable. Applications that cross platforms and create an experience for the user to experience that same intellectual property on multiple platforms do better, literally 100% better. So with Unity, you get there with no overhead, and for the most part, you create a better app than you otherwise would have created. And when Unity 5.0 gets out of its beta and goes into a more normal consumer use or developer use, it'll blow you away. So first, in a multi-platform world, you got to be on Unity or something like it, and frankly, there's nothing like Unity. I'd say the second thing that I've learned working with Unity that's interesting is I described moments ago this multi-stovepipe ecosystem. There's a Microsoft ecosystem, the Amazon ecosystem, the Facebook ecosystem, the Apple ecosystem, and I can go on and add to them. There are precious few companies with the innovative insight that Unity has, which is to play across those platforms and across those ecosystems and address a consumer across those ecosystems. It's almost impossible to do that well on your own without help. Unity is an awesome tool to provide you, just that help. The last point I'd make, and I'll reference David Helgeson's comment, from earlier today. He talked about democratizing game development as the call or the mission of Unity when they were started. And I want to triple emphasize how important it is to have such a clear call in what it's resulted in. Two stats will prove this out to you in ways that you might not have thought. There's approximately 6 million people today writing code in the gaming industry. People that are trying to write code to reach the market you're trying to reach. 3.5 million of them use Unity. There's never been something like that ever. That is a big deal. It's not a small deal. It's a gigantic deal. Go to one of the Unite events, and you feel like you're at a Rolling Stones concert, or pick somebody a little more, I don't know, a Taylor Swift concert, although that's not my thing. But you're at this, this throng of enthusiasm. I'll give you another stat, because it's not just, people sometimes think it's just small guys. Week in and week out, well north of 100 million games are installed that were built on Unity. It probably is closer to 200 million. We don't have telemetry on all of it. Think about that, 100 million a week. That's the power of an idea, the power of democratizing game development. Developers have voted. They've been democratized. They're using Unity. Consumers have voted. 100 million a week are voting for that. So this cross-platform idea that is made, if you will, by the concept of democratizing game development, big thoughts.
It seems like the leadership of Unity has more to do with stewardship or responsibility, I guess, than other things.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, if you meet and spend time with David and Joachim and Lars and Henrik and Tony and Todd and the rest of it, and you actually go down multiple layers in the organization, every single one of them reads and gets engaged in the blogs and spends time with developers. I can't figure out exactly why they do Unite, other than they want to shake, 50,000 hands. Mm-hmm. They are so close to that development community. They almost don't need to do research to figure out what that community wants, because they're in constant dialogue. You don't need to research what your family needs for dinner. You just talk to them. These guys don't need to research or A/B test or whatever. They just talk to their consumers. Their consumer is the developer, and they do it every day.
So you're using this word platform differently, I guess, maybe. Can you talk about that, and who do you sort of view as winning platform wars?
Well, look, I actually think we almost need another word, because the word platform gets very, very confusing in time. You know, these large companies, Amazon, Google, Apple, Facebook, likely Samsung down the road, and a few others, Microsoft clearly with all their ambitions. You know, they are the behemoths that are striding over our entire industry, and anybody that builds games has to navigate through them. And so right now they're all winning, but I think increasingly these ecosystems are about content, they're about about content, they're about commerce, and increasingly they're about interoperability, which is one of the reasons I think Unity strategy is so powerful. If I were to point out something that would be fun to think about when it comes to the winners of this right now, is longer term, in my experience, walled gardens end up giving way to more open platforms. And some of these, and I'll let you use your own imagination, some of these large players are more open to interoperability with others. And I think that's going to be a key feature of success. Another is, if you think about Sony and Microsoft. So there's 2 billion TVs that are turned on every week in the world today. There's just as many mobile devices that are turned on every week around the world today. And the sale of PCs and the sale of TVs and the sale of mobile devices count in the billions. And Mike Pachter was talking earlier today about maybe someday that current generation guys would get into 125 million units each. So it's $250 million if they both reach their wildest dreams, and multiple billions in terms of opportunity to access new users, if you're going after the mass TV, the smart TV, and or mobile. And I think one of the interesting questions is whether either Sony, Microsoft, or both are going to do the most obvious thing, which is set their ecosystem free. Right now, it's tied to a particular piece of hardware. But there's no reason, you can't have Xbox Live on your iPad. There is no reason that you can't have PSN on a Samsung device. None at all. Think about, you say, well, they would never accept that. Apple lets Netflix show up on their platform, and they actually compete directly with Netflix with a variety of their services. So these things aren't impossible, they just require a different mindset. And that's that interoperability mindset that I was talking about earlier.
Mario on a Windows phone as well? No.
Well, look, I've wanted Mario on a phone of some sort for a while. We'll see if that happens.
So you're an advisor to Oculus as well, and Oculus has led this very charmed and accelerated life so far. How do they keep that going and not screw it up?
So first off, it's been an enormous pleasure to advise Brendan and his team. They are living the charmed life. I'd make 2 points about them before I provide any advice. The first is they are driven by a singular and powerful idea. And that idea is that Brendan quotes it as being presence. They want this device, the Oculus Rift, to be so great that when you put that in front of your face or put it on your head, you feel like you've been transported to another place. And for anybody that has experienced that in their offices, where you can see what the consumer product will ultimately be, they are going to make that happen. The second thing that I think I would underpin is they're led by people like Brendan Uribe, Nate Mitchell, John Carmack, and I could list a host of others. I've rarely come across a group of people that are so maniacally focused on the existential 1% where great is found. And it doesn't happen very often. It's magic when you see it. It's why I was thrilled to work with them. And I would say this, the advice on how not to screw it is don't let either of those things get screwed up. And what I've seen so far, and I continue to talk with them post their Facebook acquisition, is Facebook didn't come in and send accountants in and screw them to the floor and try to extract the wisdom or the juice or give them 50 other things to manage and confuse them with a lack of focus. They said, we love what you're doing over there. We love the people that are leading that. Here's more resources. Do more of what you're doing now. And as long as that remains the case, I think VR, led by the team at Oculus, is going to be pretty darned impressive when it gets back to us as consumers.
Very good. You want to take one question? Anybody got a question? Go with, okay, there's one.
Okay, great. Good morning, John. Yeah, thanks for all the insight. My name is Patrick Merck. I'm an EIR at Signia Venture Partners. Also work with F50 Ventures. I had a question for you about emerging markets. So, we were hearing some of the discussions earlier today about, Android One and the market opportunities that are out there, and obviously seeing, the platform holders going into China and other markets like that. But when you look at, the demographics on mobile, and you look at a market like India, where 95% plus of the market there is on prepaid phones, or the penetration of credit cards is so small, naturally the question comes up for games developers. How do you monetize those markets? And one would think intuitively, well, potentially maybe there's an opportunity for games that are monetizing through advertising. So I was just wondering if you could share with us your thoughts on what are the options for developers to monetize those kind of markets where obviously the growth is huge, but the monetization avenues are not so clear.
Well, yeah, I start. The problem is this is one of those problems that doesn't have sort of a crackerjack answer where you open up and it's 2 sentences. It's got a more complex answer than that. The starting point I would tell you is we're already seeing good monetizations in almost all the developing markets, but it varies by market. And a lot of it is things like GameForge was doing early, monetizing well in Eastern Europe and Turkey and North Africa with a PC-based free-to-play model. And you see a lot of that working pretty well in Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, a few other markets, where for reasons often government-led, consoles or high-end PCs are really hard to come by because of cost. One of my favorite companies in the world, and I never pronounce it correctly, it's a Chinese company called Xiaomi. And these guys are staggering innovators. And if you want to know what they're going to hate me for this, but I think what their strategy is to make Apple at 1/3 the price. So, TV, phone, tablet, all that intersection, the ecosystem behind it. And I was expecting, and I had the chance to see their pipeline early, to put some of this stuff in my hand and say, oh, it's going to feel cheesy and cheap. It doesn't. It feels great. And they just ran a sale on some of their new devices in India just a few weeks ago. And this couldn't be true, but it's close enough to true. They sold out in 2.5 seconds. Now, they only put 55,000 phones out, if I read the news story correctly. But I don't think they can sell 55,000 phones every 2.5 seconds forever. They might run out of some level of demand. But India has actually been a market for many years where there's a deep technology understanding, deep education, broad. It's been slow to come up on the gaming curve, but you can see it coming everywhere. And you do need to get from a feature phone to a smartphone to get the level of monetization that's sustainable. And I just think it's inevitable that we're going to see smartphones in virtually all of these markets. And it's likely to be led by smart players like Xiaomi that are bringing the price down. There's room for more in a market that's this big. But this thing says I'm over time. And I have 6 more vectors that I won't touch on because there's no one simple answer for that one. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.